Halli Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. I am Jisary and today I will show you how to set up a digital comic project, both in terms of preparation and execution. I will do this following an own new comic project of mine. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. In the first video I showed the project I want to do and why, and I designed my 2 main characters. If you are interested in seeing it, the link is in the description. It is not necessary to have seen it to understand this video, but you will get some context on the materials that I will show here, so feel free to check it out if you want to. Before you can really start drawing a comic, there are a few things you need to prepare. Here's a basic checklist. You might look at this and think, I don't need all of this to draw comics, I can just start. Well, and technically you are correct, even though you still need to mark at least some of those points, because you need them to set up your series online. I would still strongly advise though to follow this checklist. It ensures that you are on the right track, that you don't lose your motivation halfway through, that you have an idea worth drawing, and that you don't hit brick walls all the time. Let me explain what I mean. Obviously, most projects start with an idea or a concept. This can be anything, from a few words over a general theme up to a complete epic story setup. In general, there are no good or bad ideas, but there are ideas interesting to a broader or smaller audience. Depending on your expectations on what you want to achieve with your comic, it might be worth looking into the mainstream appeal of your idea. If you just draw for yourself, this step can of course be skipped. Hand in hand with the general idea goes the general setup of your comic. This includes the genre, structure, and size. Comics can be anything, from one-pager slice-of-life stories all the way to epic fantasy journeys over 500 chapters. You should think about what you want to do here, as this influences how you should set up your chapters and upload schedule. Keep in mind, the longer your story, the longer it will take you to finish it, not only the whole comic, but also single chapters and milestones. I will talk more about this later in the video. When you roughly know what you want to do, you probably have already a base idea what the story should be. Work it out more. No matter what you think how far you are, you will run into issues when you don't have your story planned out properly. Identifying all the characters and places you need is imperative. If you plan on creating a bigger story, it is important to check it for the flow as well. You need character arcs, challenges for your hero to overcome, and generally a setup that makes sense and has an end. Trust me, don't start on a big comic when you don't know how it ends. Otherwise, it will likely never end. If you are unsure about the general setup of stories, you should check materials that describe the general flow of a story with an introduction, confrontation, and a resolution. Setting up a good story with a satisfying conclusion is a skill that needs practicing, so you should not underestimate this aspect of your project. Again, if your story is more centered around daily, short slices of life, without an overarching big storyline, this point is not super important, but might still be interesting to check out for specific smaller stories or chapters within your project. After you are done with your story and identified the characters you need, you would start designing the main characters. The main character is the person the reader spends the most time with. It is not easy to have an appealing main character that is also flawed, but flaws are very important for your character to have, to make them relatable, and for them to have something to overcome and create conflict. If you want to see how I designed my 2 main characters, you can watch part 1 of the series. Again, the link is in the description. The side characters are also important to design up front. You don't necessarily need all of them right at the start, but the more certainty you have, the better your story will come together when you have them, especially when it comes to figuring out the details. And designing doesn't end here. Think about your world. You have a story and probably thought about the basics of what you need for the world, but think more. As soon as you start drawing, you will often run into details about the world your characters live in. And when you didn't think enough about it, you will also encounter design inconsistencies. And you will need to make changes later to your existing character designs, which takes a lot of time and effort. An example. For my old version of the Nenomicon Crisis, The story played in the desert, and the Ninomocons were little fluffy rabbit-like creatures. In my comic, I established that the Ninomocons are super important for the economy of this village. But how? Why is a fluffy rabbit important for living in the desert? What does the desert village have from this? And the answer is, I didn't think this through. It would have made way more sense to adjust whatever benefit the Ninomocons bring to the desert. Have an animal whose sweat can be used as water, or provide leather that doesn't make you sweat at all. Or even change the setting to a snowy mountain if I wanted to have a fluffy furry animal. And this is what I mean. Questions that appear small might have a bigger repercussions down the line and alter your designs. Especially when you work within the fantasy setting, it is important to have a rough idea about religion, authorities, economy, etc., so that it can inform your character designs. The bigger and longer your comic project is, the more important this becomes. And also spend some time designing the set pieces your story will take place in. If your characters live in a forest town, the buildings should probably be predominantly made out of wood. Maybe the people live in the trees even. Maybe they earn their keep with hunting, and so on. For most people, these steps are not the most fun and they can take a lot of time, but it is worth spending this time. Otherwise, you will need to figure out panel by panel what is in the background of your characters, and inconsistencies will easily pile up. And last but not least, you need a name for your project. I often work with a placeholder name until I'm done with everything, and then I figure the name out. Often I have name ideas while I work on the format checklist. There is not really a right or wrong here, just preference. I preferred short, snappy names with somewhat unique words to make them easier searchable. So, what now? You have your idea planned out, the story is fully written down, and all characters and places designed. Congratulations, you are now ready to start drawing. But what format do you draw in? There are many possibilities, like reading from left to right, or right to left, color or black and white, or even single pages versus top-down scrolling. Since comics turned digital, the setup of how comics are read changed a lot and was diversified. There is again no right or wrong here. The answer is a mixture of preference and how you plan on releasing your comic. There are many ways of distribution. You can print out your comic, self-publish via platforms like Amazon, and so on. For the sake of this video, I will concentrate on digital distribution that doesn't really need any preparation or monetary investment. Digital publishing websites like Webtoons or Tapas. These are pages where people can read and publish their stories freely. It is possible to earn money with them, but it takes a lot of work to do so, as the visibility of self-made comics here is pretty hard to get. But since it is easy to use and doesn't need an upfront investment, I would recommend starting here if you want others to read your comic. I will show you how to set up a so-called series on Tapas. The setup is roughly the same for all of the pages, so Tapas is only as an example. And no, I am not sponsored. You first need to make yourself an account, as with most websites. Then you can press the Publish button. On some pages it's called Release or Create Series. Here you have a few things that you need to fill out. The name you should already have. Besides that, you need to think of a good description of your project. Don't write your complete story here. Think of this more as a marketing text that should make people excited. I have already something prepared and just copy it over. Then you need to add thumbnails. All pages have different requirements here for what they allow. The format, the file size, sometimes even the elements that they need to entail. Like for example here, the banner needs the name of the comic on the thumbnail. You first need to check which requirements the page has that you would like to publish on. I create one artwork in the biggest allowed size across all platforms, and afterwards I cut it into all the needed sizes. This is a lot of boring, busy work because all pages want something else and many require specific max sizes, so you need to resize, mix and match a lot to fulfill all the requirements. You can concentrate on one page, but publishing on multiple ones increases your audience range for little effort, so I would consider it. How much effort you want to put into the thumbnail itself is up to you. But I recommend to think at least a little bit about this, as this is the first thing that people see and what should motivate them to click on your series. For my thumbnail, it was important to have both characters in them and to have them distinguishable in smaller sizes. And I positioned them close to each other to ensure I can use them in all thumbnail dimensions. Theoretically, you can just add the comic name or an emoji. It is really up to you. You can change the thumbnails later as well. I'm pretty sure I will do so later down the line. But you need them in order to upload or create the series, so in the beginning you will need thumbnails. When you start uploading chapters, they also need thumbnails, so keep that in mind. You also need to choose which genre your comic belongs to. In my case, it is fantasy and comedy, and also action. On Tapas you can choose 3, each page is a little different, but here there are 3 and 1 main genre then you need to choose. You also can add text to your comic. I'm not sure how important it is and it is optional, so I will skip it. The rest is not so important to look at. So then, you have everything planned out, the series is set up, and you started drawing. Good job! When you are at this point, you already spent a lot of time on your project and got further than many other people did, so a pat on the back is adequate. Depending on your expectations though, your work doesn't stop here. If you are like me and you would like people to read your comic, you need to work on your visibility. This means spending time with marketing. I know, this sounds weird, but it basically only describes the work that goes into increasing the reach of a product. So any advertisements you do on websites or with your friends, etc. is already marketing. When you first start publishing your comics, you will likely not get many views. The competition is huge, and getting seen is hard. Don't be demotivated by this. It can be frustrating that you put so much work into this and no one notices. But know that it doesn't say anything about the quality or your idea of the most part. It is likely that people just didn't recognize your comic. And there are a few things you can do. First, check your thumbnail. As I said, it is the main touching point for people. So check how your thumbnail looks amongst the list of other comics and think about how to improve it. Having a good, recognizable brand is a skill in of itself, and I could make a video just talking about this. But generally speaking, good contrast, easy to recognize shapes and clear colors are a good start. Secondly, upload regularly. After you uploaded a new page, you are top of the list for a little time. Try to use this to your advantage. Readers typically don't like reading just one new page after the other, but it's your best bet to increase visibility in the beginning, so try to be smart with your upload schedule. In the end, consistency is king, just as on any other social media. Besides comic page specific things, cross-marketing is a good idea. If you have a TikTok account or DeviantArt account or YouTube, whatever it is, use these channels to help you. Show people your comic on other platforms and channel them into the comic page. It is a slow process, but it slowly increases the views, and more views make it easier on the comic page itself to find you. And last but not least, give the comic links to your friends. You might also get good honest feedback from them that is not filtered through the internet bubble. And getting feedback is not easy, but it helps you improve. I want to end with some general learnings and tips that accumulated over the last, roughly 25 years of me drawing comics. The first one is, if it is your first project or an early one, start small. If you are like me, the big epic stories are what draw you in, but these are also the hardest to make. In my experience, having a never-ending project gets demotivating over time, because it never ends. And each chapter progresses the story so little and slowly that it feels like you are working the pace of a snail. Start small and build up. Or at the very least, think hard about how you want to manage a bigger project, how you can upload regularly and keep up your motivation. The second tip is, be patient with yourself. Oftentimes, artists get very impatient. They start drawing too early, don't prepare enough, and as a result run into issues along the way. A comic is a big project, and it involves many skills to learn. Be patient with yourself as you learn. Enjoy the journey. Understand that you are in the process of improving and that it takes time. Really have fun. Another important learning, which is really more art than comic related, is learn to listen to feedback. Understanding feedback and learning from it is, again, a skill you should learn if you want to improve. Keep in mind that feedback is nothing personal. Feedback also doesn't say anything about your art, whether it's good or not. It is subjective after all. But feedback gives you information about how others perceive your art and what would make it more attractive to them. If you don't care for numbers and you just draw for yourself in your little bubble, that is fine. Do what makes you happy. But if you want to improve, listening to what people say and understand what changes would improve your art will make a big difference. And this doesn't only apply to art, it is a generally speaking a good skill to have. Which brings me to my last tip for today. Interact with your audience. The longer you create content and share it with the world, the more people will see it. On the one hand, they might give you feedback, but on the other, they might also just share their opinions about a scene or how they interpret a topic within your comic, etc. People reading your comics and taking time writing a comment shows that they care for what you are doing. And the more you can interact with them on this, the more they will care. Back in the day when I started drawing, the digital side of art wasn't as developed, so I had to print my comics out and give them to my family and friends to read. Observing them and seeing their reactions to some of the scenes were some of the most memorable memories I have and brought me so much joy. Not only the fact that what I created invoked feelings in them, also the fact that they totally misinterpret sometimes what I wanted to say. It was very interesting for me. Those interactions can bring a lot of joy and motivation and can help you understand your own story even better. So I can only recommend you cherish those interactions and let them grow if you can. And that brings me to the end for now. I could go on and on about this, tell you stories, share even more of my experiences, but at some point I need to end this video. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope it was helpful to you and gave you some motivation and helped to start your own project. If you want more of this kind of content, let me know. Comics are one of my favorite art forms, so I would be happy to share more information if you want. Let me know what you're interested in. And with that, I will take my leave. Thank you again so much for watching. As stated before, you all taking time of your days and interacting with the content I create, be it watching this video or leaving a comment or reading my comics, whatever it may be, I truly appreciate you, all of you. Look out for yourselves, stay healthy and comfy, until we meet again.